Take your seats. If you could take your seats. Okay, good afternoon. I formally declare open this council meeting of the Colac Otway Shire Council on the 25th of May 2022. Almighty God, we seek your blessing and guidance in our deliberations on behalf of the people of the Colac Otway Shire. Enable this council's decisions to be those that contribute to the true welfare and betterment of our community. I would like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of this land, their elders past and present, and welcome any descendants here today. I would like to advise that this council meeting will be recorded and live streamed with the exception of confidential matters. This includes the public participation sections of meetings. The live stream recording of this afternoon's meeting will be available on the website as soon as practical. By participating in open council meetings, individuals consent to the use and disclosure of the information they share at the meeting, including any personal and/or sensitive information. Please note that it is an offence to make an unauthorised recording of the meeting. Can I ask that council staff record all those present today? Okay, we've received no apologies or leaves of absence. Now moving on to question time. Colac Otway Shire encourages community input, and integral to this is the opportunity provided to ask questions at council meetings. Community members wishing to ask questions of council by video conference were requested to register their intention to do so before 5 p.m. on Monday the 23rd of May 2022. No requests were received. I have received questions in writing from Mr James Judd, Mr Andrew Buchanan, Mr Jeff Cook, Mr Bill Gross, Ms Jo Dunsmuir and Ms Rosamond Longmore. Each question received will be read out and a response will be provided by the relevant member of the executive team. I just might quickly ask also, can I have a show of hands of who would like to ask a question from the gallery, just so I have an understanding? All right, thank you. All right, we'll move on to written questions. Question 1 from Mr James Judd, Colac. Due to rapid decreases in funds provided per year by the Colac Otway Shire Council for drainage construction and upgrades, can the council give any definitive undertaking it will find the money and spend it in the Colac 2050 growth plan area just to upgrade and improve the drainage system so this plan can be introduced on time when at the current rate of allocations you would only provide a fraction of the council estimated costs for drainage upgrades in this area, even if all were spent in this area until 2050. Now major construction costs are going up fast every year with increased land values and a Victoria state government's increasing value of land tax now policy. Plus the state has claimed for its claimed owing before council will get anything. Response from Acting General Manager Development and Community Services. Ian, Mr Surin, sorry.
Through you, Mayor. Developers of land in the Colac 2050 growth plan area will be required to establish drainage treatment and conveyance and/or detention systems on their own land as it is developed, as is the case in many similar situations across Victoria. Developers will also be required to make financial contributions to council to help establish broader drainage infrastructure to support new development.
Question 2, from what source is all the water needed to hold the music festival at Pennyroyal Plains to come if this is to be drawn from the sources used to supply reticulated water to the Shire? How will it impact on other water supplies if water supply is low, when crowds are expected that will far exceed this Shire's normal population? Plus at that period of the year we have big demand increases along the coast in a major holiday period. Water cannot be extracted from aquifers or we will end up with problems in other areas for over-extraction of water since this is now evident in parts of this Shire. Response from General Manager Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. If approved, the proposed music festival would need to provide sufficient water supply to cater for the event. Therefore, it would not adversely impact the water supply available to residents of the Shire.
Question three, with the population growth in the Colac Otway Shire, do we have baby welfare services growing to cater for any increased demand for services by the increased population in areas where needed? Or is any increase limited to only certain geographic areas instead of areas where most needed? If anything, the Colac area is going backwards as services are reduced for preschoolers. Plus, the highest growth rates are around Colac according to projections. You cannot keep providing services if only accessible by people with motorised transports. Response from General Manager, Development and Community Services.
Through you, Mayor. Whilst birth rates have been higher than average in the past year in the Colac Otway Shire, our overall population growth is still approximately 0.6%. Council has maternal and child health centres in Colac, Apollo Bay and Colrook, and also provides occasional visiting services to Hyde venues in Birregurra and Coloran based on local demand. Our maternal and child health nurses also make house calls, especially to some of our more remote customers. With these approaches combined, local families have many options when accessing maternal and child health services. Our services will continue to adequately service demand as our population grows.
Okay, last question. As the Colac Otway Shire Council owns the garbage bins used by those who use the Council's garbage collection service that Council charges a fee to use, how can Council justify its refusal to promptly replace garbage bin lids when Council changes what is allowed to be put in a bin when an indication has been given by Council that Council will not change these lids for decades? Plus, Council officers keep being critical of the community for not sorting garbage correctly. Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through you, Mayor, Council is encouraging all residents to download the Good Sort app and use comprehensive A to Z waste material guide to find out what goes in each bin, given that this has changed over the years. For information of residents, we provided the most up-to-date recycling information, which was attached to the purple glass-only bins recently when they were delivered. We hope that this has proven useful in informing of the correct items for each bin. We note that the bins have a life cycle of 10 years, and given the fast evolution of the waste system, we will not be in future putting such specific information on lids to avoid any possible confusion for residents. Instead, options for more readily accessible information such as the app and Council's website will be used. The replacement of the current bins is likely to be post-2026, subject to bin condition. On this basis, it's not prudent for the Shire to replace all lids given the number 10,500 and the associated cost, which would be a burden on ratepayers and an impost on the waste charge. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Now, questions from Mr Andrew Buchanan, Apollo Bay. Mr Buchanan has asked a number of questions regarding the temporary loading zone at 135 Great Ocean Road. These questions will, as they all sort of relate to the same matter, the answer to the question will be, questions will be consolidated at the end and provided by the Acting General Manager of Environment and Infrastructure. Okay, the questions are as follows. When Colac Otway Shire last surveyed the owners, occupiers regarding the temporary loading zone, what was the percentage of positive responses? Apart from consulting the nearby traders, what other investigations were carried out by COS to access the need for a truck loading zone at this location? The safety issues associated with this and various other possible locations and the appropriate size and position of the loading zone to best serve the needs for a loading zone on the usually very busy Great Ocean Road. Is the Colac Otway Shire aware that the shops nearest to this temporary loading zone have loading and parking areas accessible from Pascoe Street? Apollo Bay has had a very long-term practice of discouraging vehicles from both crossing and unloading across the Great Ocean Road footpath. When this loading zone was first proposed, we were told that it was a trial and only temporary. It was to gauge community feedback. When is Colac Otway Shire going to remove the loading zone signage? Will Colac Otway Shire also re-establish the garden area by removing the temporary concrete infill next to the temporary loading zone? Has Colac Otway Shire received any other requests to remove this temporary loading zone? The Apollo Bay Streetscape Study 1992 suggested that this area, 5A to 16, on the image below, was to have a footpath extension and pedestrian crossing. Footpath extension went 45% of the distance to Hardy Street. 16 is outdoor seating and eating on this area. When the temporary loading zone was proposed, was the potential and long planned for pedestrian use considered? Okay, response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through you, Mayor, Council surveyed owners and occupiers in February 2022 regarding the installation of the trial loading zone at this location. Of the 20 owners occupiers contacted, Council only received 3 responses, of which there was no positive response received. Consideration and investigation included an assessment of availability of loading bays within the vicinity of the area. The trial location was assessed taking into account safety, appropriate loading bay size, and if the area would service the needs of businesses. Council is aware properties have access from Pascoe Street. However, not all businesses are able to utilise the back laneways for deliveries due to larger vehicles being unable to manoeuvre as required. Given the feedback received, Council will remove the loading zone, including signage, following notification to affected businesses, and consideration will be given as to whether or not the hard stand should remain or be removed. Council has also received other requests for temporary loading bay to be removed. In relation to the long plan pedestrian use, this was considered in the context of the more recent studies to ensure the trial aligned with the intent and vision. These studies include the Apollo Bay, Skeins Creek, Marengo Community Infrastructure Plan and the Colac Otway Shire Tourism and Parking Strategy. Council notes the information contained within the study completed in 1992. However, development of areas like that described in the image provided are no longer referenced in more recent studies. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Now, questions from Jeff Cook, Colac. Question 1. At the 20 April 2022 Special Council meeting, the General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure stated that the Environment Strategy would not be completed until the end of the year 2022, and the Climate Change Action Plan would probably be completed next year, 2023. Given that the CCAP is a critically important piece of work and officially committed to in the Council plan, why was this decision made and communicated to the public without a formal vote and decision by councillors? Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through you, Mayor, the Council plan was adopted by Council and set targets for the development of a new Environment Strategy and Climate Change Action Plan. Councillors provide update to councillors at councillor briefings and report against these initiatives in regular reports presented at council meetings. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Question 2. Since there is a climate emergency, why can't the Climate Change Action Plan be brought forward and developed ahead of the Environment Strategy? That is, completed well before the end of this year and ready for implementation. Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through you, Mayor, Council's new Environment Strategy will set the strategic direction, priorities and targets for a number of key focus areas, including climate change, natural and built environments, waste and water, which will in turn inform and guide actions identified and included in an action plan to work towards achieving those priorities and outcomes. In developing the strategic direction of any service, it is important to firstly develop a strategy and then action plans come out of that particular strategy. In the meantime, Council will continue to seek opportunities to work with other local governments, state and federal government agencies and community groups to take action on climate change and continue to reduce carbon emissions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Question 3. The Manager, Environment and Infrastructure has stated publicly and more than once that the lack of staff in the Environment team is the reason for the recently announced delay in completing the Climate Change Action Plan and the Environment Strategy. If this is the case, why doesn't Council avail itself of the offers made by people in the community to form a task force to work with Council and staff to complete the Climate Change Action Plan as a matter of urgency? Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through you, Mayor, officers are currently planning the development of Council's new Environment Strategy and Climate Action Plan, which will include extensive community engagement and consultation prior to and also after the development of the new draft Environment Strategy and related action plan to follow. Community engagement opportunities will commence in June 2022 and will be widely advertised to ensure wide-reaching and meaningful consultation as the new strategy is developed. Engagement opportunities will include workshop with key stakeholder groups such as local environmental, sustainability and climate groups. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I have a question from Mr. Bill Gross, Apollo Bay. Are councillors aware that at the request of the owner of the premises at 135 Ocean Road, Apollo Bay, the site of the proposed BWS shop, a temporary loading zone was permitted outside the premises, and that there have since been strong objections to the loading zone from the proprietors of adjacent retail businesses, and that if council decides to comply with the objectors' request to remove the loading zone, a positive side effect may be the withdrawal of the BWS permit application, given there is no suitable unloading access for BWS behind the premises. Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through you, Mayor, councillors have been provided with information relating to the temporary loading zone and associated business consultation. Whilst it is noted that the applicant requesting the plan approval for development is seeking an on-site loading zone near the premises, the outcome of the trial loading zone is not linked to the planning application. As such, any determination relating to the planning application is separate to this issue. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Questions from Joe Dunsmuir, Apollo Bay. Question 1. What is the minimum size trucks that BWS will use to deliver goods to their proposed premises in Collingwood Street, Apollo Bay via the currently temporary loading zone? Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through you, Mayor, the information provided by BWS, the Endeavour Group, advises the facility would be serviced using a half-tonne, 6-metre long delivery vehicle. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Question 2. How big will the loading zone be if BWS have a permit granted, and by how much will the adjacent parklet be reduced? Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through you, Mayor, a loading bay can be provided in this area without impact to the size of the parklet. The loading bay would be approximately 7 metres in length.
Thank you. Questions from Rosamond Longmore Colac. One question. On April 27th, I was advised by the General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure that Council continues to explore, investigate and seek funding for greenhouse emission reduction projects and opportunities, and supports local community sustainability environment groups with their projects. Having asked for specific information about Council action plans, I am very disappointed with the generalised response. Can Council provide evidence of its future efforts in this area? Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through you, Mayor, Council recently committed to become a member of the Barwon South West Climate Change Alliance to progress our efforts across the region towards emission reductions. Future actions range from land use planning projects to protect the community from impacts of climate change, to increasing clean energy, renewable energy generation in our municipality, and continue to reduce Council's own corporate emissions, which have been reduced by 60% over the last 10 years. We are also supporting, both by grants and direct participation, a number of community groups that are delivering projects that address the impacts of climate change. Some examples of our recent and ongoing work include continuing to restore and revegetate council-managed land to improve biodiversity and habitat, and support community groups to do the same. Continue to integrate more electric vehicles into Council's vehicle fleet, supporting the recently completed G21 Geelong Plus solar bulk buy program that delivered 240 kilowatts of solar and 167 kilowatts of battery storage, installed at 45 households and businesses in Colac Otway. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Final question. Regarding support given to community groups, why doesn't Council provide real leadership by declaring a community-wide emissions reduction target? Response from Acting General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure.
Through you, Mayor, targets relating to emissions reduction, both corporate and community-wide, will be discussed, debated and considered as part of the development of Council's new environment strategy, based on wide-ranging community and stakeholder consultation regarding the priorities and targets that are within the remit of Council to effectively control or influence. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, so now we'll move on to questions from the gallery. To ensure everyone has the opportunity to ask questions, I may need to limit the number of questions from each person to 2. Then once everyone has had an opportunity to ask their initial questions, and if time permits, I will invite further questions. Please note that whilst we will do our best, it may not be possible to answer all questions without notice tonight. If this is the case, they will be answered later. Before we proceed, I remind everyone in the gallery that you must ask a question, but you are entitled to a short preamble. All right, now I think Mr. Webber had his hand up to ask a question. Thank you.
Tony Webber, Otway Forum. Is the council aware that the Gambier Street part of the Recreation Reserve is public open space and that the community, most of the public land in Apollo Bay is either subject to river flooding or potential sea level rise? So will the council, in their structure plan, advocate for keeping that as public open space?
I'll ask Mr Surin to answer that question.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Mr Webber. Yeah, certainly aware that the Recreation Reserve is public open space, including the area adjacent to Gambier Street. You'll see in the agenda tonight that we're looking at the draft community infrastructure plan, and that recommends that the Recreation Reserve remains where it is, and then future development will be subject to a master planning process, which has just kicked off.
Right, thanks. The next question is on the same infrastructure plan. It is stated in there that the War Memorial may be moved or beautified. This is an appraisal of the roundabout process that the community was not happy with. So are we assured that this is not the reinstatement of the roundabout on the Great Ocean Road and Nelson Street?
I'll ask Mr Surin to respond.
Through you, Mayor. If you have a look at the draft plan, when they go on public exhibition, you'll see that there isn't a roundabout there. Right. The plan is recommending that the memorial might move just slightly, just to provide better access for the community.
If I can have another question.
Yes, you can have another question.
There's proposed to have pedestrian traffic lights or, zebra crossings at Maringo and Skeens Creek. Now, the Otway Forum has asked for many years for the lights in the town to be stop-go lights rather than pedestrian lights, because when you get a very busy time in Apollo Bay, the traffic gets banked up a long way because people just use the crossing. So I suggest that those crossings and the present ones be stop-go, so people have to press the button to stop the traffic and then the traffic gets a go. So will you consider that?
Mr Surin, would you like to respond?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Thanks again, Mr Webber. What I would suggest is once the draft plan's on public exhibition, that the Otway Forum might look to put a submission in based on what you've just said.
Right. And the last question is, on the two-way radio situation, has a final report been presented to Council yet?
I'll ask the CEO to respond.
So thank you, Mr Webber, through the Chair. Councillors have received update in relation to the final financial matters. There's been no final report presented to Council yet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Webber. Would anybody else like to ask a question in the gallery? Yes. Yeah, if you want to come up, state your name and Andrew Buchanan. Yeah, nice to see you. I didn't recognise you with the mask on out there.
It's Andrew Buchanan from Skeens Creek, Apollo Bay, and I'm sorry to re-ask this question, but I didn't hear the answer clearly before, and it was to do with when the temporary loading zone was to be removed in the Apollo Bay Main Street, please. I just didn't hear the answer.
Oh, okay. I might just ask the General Manager of Environment and Infrastructure just to...
Through you, Mayor, as soon as we consult with the businesses, we'll be removing that sign.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the gallery? No. All right, thank you. Thanks very much. Okay. Now we'll move on to petitions and joint letters. A co-signed letter regarding the funding agreement for the Lavish pool was received from the community on the 18th of May 2022. 43 community members have put their name to the co-signed letter. The Lavish pool funding agreement is listed for consideration at today's council meeting in accordance with the Governance Rule 57(11). If the petition or joint letters relates to any item already on the agenda for the council meeting at the time the petition or joint letter is submitted, the chair may decide that the petition or joint letter will be dealt with in conjunction with that agenda item. So thank you. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Councillor McCracken.
Thanks, Mayor. I have a conflict to declare on the first item, which is the Hillview planning matter. The reason I have a conflict is because my principal place of residence is close by, and it might be a material interest in that matter because the proposal, whether it succeeds or not, might have an impact on my amenity at home. So I'll declare an interest on that.
Thank you. Okay, I propose that we move to confirm the minutes from the council meeting held on the 27th of April 2022 and the minutes from the unscheduled council meeting held on the 4th of May 2022. Do I have a mover? Councillor Hart, is there a seconder? Councillor McCracken, is that to be opposed? No. I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.1, of which Councillor McCracken has a conflict. We'll just wait for him to leave the room. Okay, item 10.1 is the Hillview Planning Scheme Amendment request. The purpose of this report is to consider the proposed planning scheme amendment, C122 Colac, for the rezoning of land from farming zone to general residential in a limonite, and to seek ministerial authorisation to prepare and exhibit the amendment. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm interested in the design of the subdivision and whether it's going to promote the use of passenger vehicles, or whether we're allowing for public transport in the area as well. Do we have a plan to service the area with public transport?
Through you, Mayor, thank you for the question. It is proposed that if this rezoning is implemented, that there would be public transport linkages through the site. There's currently a public bus that accesses the Wayuna estate adjoining this site to the east, and it's anticipated that bus would be rerouted through this subdivision to offer that opportunity for new residents.
Councillor White.
In terms of the proposed open spaces, I'm just wondering if they're built into the plan. Is the plan to try and link up any proposed open spaces with other open spaces and to start looking at the whole of the city linking up their open spaces?
Through you, Mayor. Certainly with the Colac 2050 growth plan that was prepared a couple of years ago for Colac, which set the strategic direction, recognise that it is important that in future residential estates, as they start to become rezoned, that there is an open space network that is well linked up. And in particular, there's a proposed link that would run from the lake along the eastern Barongarook Creek corridor through to the southern extent of Colac, and then around down the Deans Creek corridor and back to the Lake Colac, providing over the long term a loop. And that would be a linear link for pedestrians and shared use. So this site here is one part of that. It's anticipated that as we move into doing strategic planning over the next year or two for the Deans Creek corridor, which is the primary area of growth, that will clearly show how open space will be provided to meet the needs of those new residents and link up with sites such as this one. Certainly for the early planning that we've undertaken for this site, it's got a primary open space corridor through the centre of the site that will take advantage of an existing waterway, and to the south is a future connection to the Old Beachy or the Colac to Lavish Hill Crows rail line, which will be an open space link that runs into Colac.
Councillor Hart. Oh, did you have a follow-up question, Councillor White? No. Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. If this resolution is passed, do we have any idea when the public might have an opportunity to comment on the proposal?
Through you, Mayor, we anticipate that we should be able to request, should this resolution be successful tonight, request the Minister to authorise the exhibition of this amendment over the coming weeks. The Minister has 10 days to respond, so we'd anticipate that within a month that we'd be able to place this amendment on exhibition.
Are there any further questions? Okay, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor Potter, do you wish to move the recommendation?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Could I move the recommendation, please?
Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor Costin, is it to be opposed? Councillor Potter is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to see the Colac Herald today, but the front page of the Colac Herald had a big headline in relation to this matter, and it just illustrates the community interest in the availability of land in the Shire, and in particular at the moment in Colac. It's well known that we're short of residential blocks, and potentially this may alleviate some of those issues and satisfy some of the demand, because people want to live in Colac, and why wouldn't you? They want to live in other areas in the Shire as well. It's a great place to be. We're here because 9 landowners got together and decided to work together on developing this land. This is not initiated by a corporation or a major developer. It's some individuals who saw the potential for land development to satisfy the need in Colac. So they got together and put together a plan working with our staff. Hasn't been an easy process, they might say, but there's lots of rules and regulations, as they found out, when you go to do a development of this size. I do want to thank officers for the way they've worked with these landholders, and councillors met with officers and landholders to have a general discussion about the issues and the way forward, and I thought that was very valuable. I note there's a way to go. We're still working on the shared infrastructure funding plan, and I hope that goes smoothly and is not too onerous on these landholders, but these things take time. They have to be developed carefully and well, and I note that it may be that if this goes ahead, some of the shortcomings of the Waiona development will be picked up and fixed through this development. So that just highlights the need to get everything right if we're going ahead with this. But councillors, I hope you support this. Still a way to go, but this is a major step in getting this development moving and more residential blocks in Colac. So once again, thanks to the landowners for the way they work together and work with officers, and thanks to the officers for their work, and I hope the Minister expedites this consideration.
Yeah, Councillor Costin.
Thanks, Mayor. I think Councillor Potter has put it very well, and I have nothing really to add other than to thank officers for their work with all the different landholders in this proposed subdivision. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? No? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 6-0. Thank you, Mr Lawrence. I think he's gone out to get Councillor McCracken. Okay, now we move to item 10.2, the draft Apollo Bay, Skeens Creek and Marengo Community Infrastructure Plan. The purpose of this report is to present the draft Apollo Bay, Skeens Creek and Marengo Community Infrastructure Plan to Council and to consider it being placed on public exhibition in accordance with Council's community engagement policy. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Oh, I think Councillor Costin was first, then Councillor Potter.
Thank you. I'm just interested to know how this community infrastructure plan will integrate with the Apollo Bay Recreation Reserve Master Plan, because there seems to be some connection in facilities that are provided on the foreshore that might need to move to another location, and the obvious location is the Recreation Reserve, but we seem to have a separate process for the master planning of the Recreation Reserve. So how do we see this fitting together? How do we see the consultation fitting together? And how do we see the public submission process fitting together for the two plans?
Mr Soren.
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Costin. We actually think the timing, should Council consider putting this on public exhibition, actually works really well with the Apollo Bay Recreation Reserve Master Plan, which we're working closely with the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority. The consultation for the master plan has just kicked off, and I understand there's some community sessions this weekend, as well as an opportunity for the broader community to complete a survey and have their say via the authority's website. So I think by releasing this for public exhibition over the coming weeks, that'll tie in nicely with the consultation that's about to happen with the Recreation Reserve Master Plan.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. If this goes out for public consultation, how do the public make submissions or comments to this plan?
Through you, Mayor, we're proposing to mail out to all owners and residents of Apollo Bay, Marengo and Skeens Creek, just indicating the opportunity to view the plans. They'll be available on our website or at the council offices, and we'll be holding a couple of community information sessions where people can drop in and talk to officers of both council and the Great Ocean Road Authority, and potentially other agencies that might be there to assist as well. So there'll be very much officers making themselves available to explain the project where people can come to those sessions, and we'll be inviting written submissions from anyone with comments who wants to express those to council, and they need to email them or mail them to council by the due date, and this will be on exhibition for a minimum of 6 weeks.
Councillor White.
I'm not sure, I might have missed it in that answer, sorry if I did. I just wonder whether some hard copies of the plan will be available around the town, because some people are not comfortable going online or whatever, just for people to have a look at, whether they'll be on display anywhere around Apollo Bay.
Through you, Mayor, our intention would be to have hard copies available at the Visitor Information Centre, which is the customer service centre there for council.
Are there any further questions? Okay. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with a report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor Costin.
Move the officer's recommendation, thank you.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Councillor Potter, I think got his hand up first. Is it to be opposed? Right, Councillor Costin is the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. As most of you know, I've had a long connection with this part of the coast. It goes right back to when I was born, which is almost too long ago to remember. And this has been an integrated plan like this one, cutting across land management boundaries, has been a vision of mine since I first worked on an integrated urban development project in Western Samoa during the mid-1990s. The beginnings of this draft Apollo Bay Skeens Creek Marengo Community Infrastructure Plan go back to at least 2017, when Council first proposed to the Otway Coast Committee that they work together on a township precinct plan. At that time, the relationship between the two parties was a little strained over various issues, such as the repair of the foreshore picnic rotunda, which was located partly on OCC foreshore and partly on Council Road Reserve. The matter went on unresolved for a long time, so long that in fact it was a local community who stepped up to raise funds and find tradies and hold working bees to save the rotunda. And a big thank you to Joe Harrison and the Friends of the Foreshore for stepping up. We've come a long time since then, come a long way since then. Around 2019, Council, Otway Coast Committee and the Department of Lands, Water and Planning warmed to the idea of an integrated plan that covered the 3 townships and also integrated OCC's coastal foreshore planning on one side of the Great Ocean Road with Council's township planning on the other side of the Great Ocean Road. The integrated plan was intended to guide future investments in community infrastructure, active transport, visitor amenities and foreshore upgrades. So while this draft CIP has been a long time coming, there's been a lot of consultation along the way with the local community, with government agencies, with the Eastern Mar Aboriginal Corporation, Department of Transport because they manage the Great Ocean Road, and with Heritage Victoria, as the Great Ocean Road is listed for its heritage value under the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. There have been numerous technical studies, consideration of state policies and legislation, lots of robust negotiations and discussions, and to make it even more challenging, the Otway Coast Committee became part of the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority on the 1st of December 2020. The preparation of this draft has required a huge amount of time, a huge time commitment for those involved, and I recognise it hasn't been an easy task. So my sincere congratulations to all those staff and consultants who've persisted over the last few years to get this draft plan to us today. Congratulations. And if Council approves this draft today, it can go out on public exhibition for a period of 6 weeks, and after the closure there'll be an opportunity for submitters to make verbal submissions to Council. And it's important to mention, I think, that the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority will remain actively involved during the consultation process. Thank you.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to Councillor Costin for summarising all the work and the history that's gone into this. I do remember, I think OCC had 70 or 80,000 to do a foreshore study, and we were going to do our own, and it just made sense to get together and do this. It just took a while to get those politics out of the way, and then it took a lot of work. And can I thank our staff, but in particular Simon Clark and Sally Conway for the work they've put into it. It's a great looking document. I think a couple of things here and there might need a little bit of a tidy up, but I'm really looking forward to the community telling us what they think and what they think needs to be tidied up. But overall, I think this is a really, really good piece of work. Well done, staff, and really looking forward to hearing what the community think of it.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. The other councillors have summarised aspects of this quite thoroughly. So the only point I'd like to add, as well as encouraging people to have a look at this plan, I'd encourage the council to consider having a hard copy at the Apollo Bay Library. Obviously the library's got the facilities for people to come and look at a document and to spend time in a comfortable place reviewing a particular document, and I think it would be good if council would at least consider whether having that available at the library would make it easier for some people who want to spend some time going over the plan.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor White.
Just very briefly also to say I think it's a fantastic looking document and well done to everybody involved over a long period of time. Obviously it's really comprehensive, and I really hope that the community does have a good look at it and take advantage and give some feedback. Particularly like the 11 guiding principles. I think they're really strong guiding principles, and I hope that is a good foundation. Well, it is a good foundation for the document. I mean, it looks at things like the Mar living culture as the #1 principle, sustainable environment. So I think it's a really strong document, and I really encourage some feedback from the community.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Thank you. now we move to item 10.3, the Asset Management Strategy and Policy. The purpose of this report is to endorse the draft asset management policy for the purpose of community consultation and to consider the adoption of the asset management strategy. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No. Right, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with a report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor McCracken. Move the recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor White. Is it to be opposed? No. Councillor McCracken. Councillor White.
Yes, it is fine. Councillor McCracken, you're right. There's been, again, another tremendous amount of work put into these documents, and it's been a really important part of my learning around the responsibilities and the depth of responsibilities of council and their assets, and also the new legislation around that. So it's been a really strong number of documents to inform us around that. So I'd just like to say that I think they've done a great job with them, and to second that motion.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. And now we move to item 10.4, the Quarterly Performance Report, January to March 2022. The purpose of this item is to present the Quarterly Performance Report to Council. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. My question relates to a table that appears on page 235 relating to building permits. I understand that council doesn't accept or doesn't encourage people to lodge building permits with them anymore, so I'm just trying to understand what these figures reflect in terms of building permits being lodged with the council.
Mr Surin.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question. So essentially, they're all building applications that are lodged within the Shire, so we get a record of that, with private building surveyors. So the first graph is around applications lodged, and the second graph is around the permits that are being issued. So you are correct, council doesn't do building permits anymore.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a question in relation to the delivery of our capital works program. That was a bit behind for a number of valid reasons, but I'm just wondering how is that tracking at the moment, and looking forward, how's it going?
Through you, Mayor, we're currently undertaking review of the capital works program. There will be some carryovers this year, but I think the new structure will certainly deliver advantages going forward in delivery of the capital works program.
Are there any other questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor McCracken. Move the recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken is the mover. No. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Thanks for the report. It's well laid out, and it provides us with all the information I think we need to get a snapshot of where we are and perhaps where we're heading. So thanks for officers for their work in putting this together.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.5, the Lavish Hill Pool Funding Agreement, Supplementary Report. At the April 2022 meeting, Council deferred item 10.2, the Lavish Hill Pool Funding Agreement, to allow further discussions at a councillor briefing prior to returning to a council meeting for a decision. The purpose of this report is to provide supplementary information and a revised officer recommendation for the Lavish Hill Pool Funding Agreement report. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Can I just flag, Mayor, when you're ready, that I have an alternative resolution, please?
Thank you. Councillor Costin.
I'm just wondering about the relationship that we've established with the pool committee and the school down there. Have we had face-to-face meetings? Have we visited the site in preparing this recommendation?
Mr Searle?
Through you, Mayor, in preparing this specific recommendation, no, we haven't. We've had numerous conversations and correspondence with the school, and we have certainly been on site to the facility in previous times, but for this specific recommendation, no, we haven't met face-to-face with the school.
Sorry, it's turned off. I'm also wondering how much we spend on recurrent recreation and sports services for our Lavish Hill and surrounding community at the moment.
Mr Searle?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I'd have to take that question on notice. I don't know the specific amount that we would spend on recreation in that region.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Hart, you flagged that you had a motion, and can I just did want to mention that when you move this motion, you might want to consider adding a 10th point, confirming that we did receive the joint letter, that the joint letter is addressed through the decision, and thanking the signatories for the letter, potentially, if you want to.
Thanks, Mayor. So that might be point 10. My resolution, in some respects, is very similar to the officer recommendation, except it has some key differences. At 6B, it has a figure of $20,000 instead of, I'd have to look at the other one, it was about 12,000 and something. And 7C, it has a figure, and I know it's on the screen, also of $20,000. That's, yeah, $20,000 is annual funding. So they're the key differences. But I'm also happy to have a point 10 that thanks the public for their joint letter and notes that this resolution is intended to respond or does respond to that joint letter. I'm happy for guidance on what those precise words might be. And perhaps, Mayor, and ask that I'm not sure whether the normal process is to send a letter to everyone or just to the person who sent it in to at least say that the outcome. Perhaps it's a letter to the person who sent it in.
Councillor Hart, you'll...
Perhaps it's rights to the first, or I would have, I'm not sure whether it's a covering person. I would have thought you'd write to the person who sent it in. Okay, and thanks them for their interest in the matter and or what have you.
Okay, is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor White. Is it to be opposed? Discussion? Councillor Hart as the mover.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The Lavish Hill pool, there was a letter published in the Otway Light some weeks ago which gave a really great history of the Lavish Hill pool, and I don't propose to go over the entire history, but more than 30 years ago the local community in and around Lavish Hill raised funds for the heated pool. It's at the Lavish Hill K-12 college, but it's accessible to the public if they become members of the pool by paying a membership fee. Otway Shire at the time made a contribution and also agreed to make a contribution to the pool over many years, providing the pool was available for public use. This agreement expired in June 2021, and although there was initially an understanding that there was a holdover period as recently as April this year, it's been clearly, that point's been cleared up, and apparently there was no holdover arrangement. Although in the meantime, the school has acted in good faith and continued to provide public access to the pool since the funding agreement expired. It's not just for the use of Lavish Hill people. People from the wider Otway community use the pool, and some even as far as Apollo Bay use this pool for hydrotherapy activities. Apparently, and I'm no expert on these matters, because the pool's a smaller pool than, say, Blue Water and some other pools, it's possible to raise the heat, to heat it up for hydrotherapy use, and then cool it down, let it cool down for lap swimming, which apparently if you've got a larger pool, you can't sort of quickly change the temperature. I understand that's done overnight before the people come for hydrotherapy. It's also Learn for Swim programs are run through the Lavish Hill pool, and recent times volunteers have undertaken training to be lifesavers, and I realise that the rules around some of these things have certainly become tightened up in the recent years. The figure of $12,500, which is in the officer recommendation, where that comes from is a cap was set in 2000 at $9,000 and $10,000, and it was indexed. I think it's worth noting that there's no way this community could have a public heated pool if it was not for this shared facility arrangement on school grounds. And in fact, we now have several shared facility arrangements. The library's a shared facility arrangement, Blue Water Fitness Centre is too. I think this provision of the facility is consistent with Council's objectives around health, water safety in relation to the Learn to Swim program and the social inclusion that derives from the hydrotherapy program, for example. And obviously there's other uses, people, lap swimmers and what have you, and there's been some inquiries in recent times about greater usage of the pool due to it being accessible to the public. The issue of the $20,000 amount, it's approximately 10% of the Apollo Bay contribution, but I think, to be quite frank, in moving this, I'm trying to find a way to assist the pool, to assist the maintenance of this facility. This is not going to cover the running costs of the pool, obviously, but trying to find that balance with the council budget that we have. And, you know, there's no science to it. I could suggest we provide a much higher figure, but I'm trying to find that balance between providing some extra assistance, particularly now the rules around lifesavers are a bit more stringent than they used to be, with council's budget position. And I appreciate that we just can't provide endless amounts to these sorts of facilities. So that's where the $20,000 comes from, and the suggestion in the resolution, if this goes ahead, is that there's no indexation, so that would give a degree of certainty to the council as to what their contribution is over the next, essentially the next 6 years, 1 year, then providing certain conditions are met, there'd be 5 years after that. But it also gives the school some certainty too. And remember, we're funding this, so it's a public facility available for the community that we would not otherwise be able to provide but for its involvement with the school.
Councillor White.
I guess I reserve.
You didn't oppose it though, did you?
Oh, sorry, I thought you...
Yeah,
I
it
thought
wasn't
you opposed.
opposed.
No,
Councillor White.
sorry, my misunderstanding. Yes, you did. Look, not to add too much more to what Councillor Hart has said, but to acknowledge the local community and their demonstration of their passion to keep the pool, and to continually lobby us to listen to their needs and why they want the pool to be ongoing. I think some of the additions have, like the 5 years, give certainty, and they can plan and work around that, which I think is a really useful part of the resolution. And also to just emphasise that the resolution does give the CEO the authority to monitor what is going on and ensure compliance, and that especially things around safety are implemented. So I'd like to support the...
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor McCracken, then Councillor Potter, then Councillor Costin.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hart, for your explanation on the $20,000. I know we'd sort of have a little bit of discussion before about it, and that's probably where a bit of my concern is. And I guess the reason was because I thought, oh, well, where is the science? Where did it come from? And you know, I get it. It's something that people would probably, they can live with. And that's fair enough. And, you know, I acknowledge that you've been a big supporter of supporting the Lavish Hill community to keep the pool. You know, good on you. One of the challenges that I have is that I think it needs to be acknowledged that I don't know how to try and say this diplomatically, but I think the pool is probably not as economical as other ones in the Shire. And I don't mean to cast doubt on any of the good work that happens there, because I acknowledge that as well. But it is not as economical as other larger population centres. And that's, I'm not trying to be horrible or diss anything, but it's just a fact. And I guess it makes the challenge of weighing things up, well, it does become more of a challenge because of that. So, I understand that, you know, there's been a bit of talking and discussion over the last week or so about this, and you might have got me on a soft day, Councillor Hart, because I might just get over the line and support it, but I think we really should look at some of these, you know, contributions that we make, and, you know, this one's going from 12,500, I think it was suggested, to up to 20. I mean, that's $7,500 in the scheme of a budget our size is probably not going to make a massive difference. But I guess in the big picture, it's the accumulation of these little things over the course of time that might have a difference. And it's probably a little bit more challenging to pick up when it's little bits as opposed to one big hit. So I just draw that to your attention, not to, you know, I know which way you're probably going to go on this, but I think it's an important issue that more broadly as a council we might need to think of, because if we don't keep a track of it, then things tend to sort of blow out, and it's not a situation that we want to be in, because as much as this might have good social outcomes, and that's been acknowledged, I do worry about the cost of this sometimes, and I think that's worth keeping an eye on as well, because as you quite rightly said, you can't throw endless buckets of money at something like this. It's not our asset, and that's been acknowledged as well. So see how I go, Councillor Hart, but you might have 51-49, you never know. Thanks.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. I would encourage Councillor McCracken to go to the 51% of his thinking in favour of this, and in favour of it. And I do understand the point of view about just finding little bits of money here and there. They add up, and our budget is tight, and we're asking the organisation to look for efficiencies and review services So we have to do our bit too, and just be careful how we spend money. Which was why, Mayor, as you probably know, I was supportive of an increase to $20,000, but for 12 months, and then was going to suggest that we get a report to see how things are going. But I think councillors have worked pretty well on this and compromised and workshopped, and I'm happy to support this as it is. And I thank the community for their lots of letters, emails and phone calls, and perhaps with the suggested time frame, they can rest easy a little bit, even though perhaps it's not as much money as they would have liked, but they don't have to stress about sending out those letters again in 12 months if this is successful. And again, thanks for the way I think we've worked together to get this result.
Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, first I'd like to thank the people of Lavish Hill for building the pool in the first place 30 years ago, and their obvious demonstrated commitment to keep it running into the future. I think about what we get for our money here, and we have a commitment in our health and well-being. We say that's fundamental. That's a fundamental business of council. The objective of our recreation service area is to provide active community involvement and the promotion of healthy lifestyles by providing suitable sporting and recreational facilities. In terms of what we're spending at the moment, I recall a conversation with an officer not long ago where we said, where I heard they were only spending around $500 for the communities along that Otway Ridge, and I think that was $500 going to the Beach Forest Recreation Reserve. And also I've got another email, because I had a similar request, which said apart from officer time, our expenditure looks like it's only $20,000 for insurance for the Old Beachy Rail Trail. So we're not putting that much into the community. And without the efforts of the local community, we wouldn't be in a position to provide this pool. And without the pool, we'd likely see a decrease in healthy lifestyles in the area, particularly for the elderly who seem to particularly use the pool. For them, swimming promotes joint and muscle health, cardiovascular fitness. So it's important for the older people. And it's important for the younger people too. Without the pool, we'd likely see an increase in the number of early years and school-age kids who don't learn to swim. And this is a skill we should be actively promoting in all our communities, given the number of lakes in our shire and a lengthy and often dangerous coastline. So I see it as a partnership, a council partnership with the community to deliver a service that we'd like to provide, but we can't provide because the cost is too high to ourselves. So it should be a partnership approach. This is a great opportunity for council to provide one of its remote communities with a recreational facility that promotes healthy and safe lifestyles. I believe we should nourish and support this community partnership because it helps us achieve our health and well-being objectives. So I've got no hesitation in increasing our contribution for the benefit of Lavish Hill and the surrounding community. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Oh, okay. We can have a we can have a 10-minute break. Okay, 5 minutes. Oh, yeah. Thank you, councillors. We'll resume the meeting. Yeah, well, Councillor McCracken said he only wanted 5. All right. Okay, now we move to item 10.6, Audit and Risk Committee Biannual Audit and Risk Report. The purpose of this report is for Council to receive for information the Colac Otway Shire Audit and Risk Committee Biannual Risk Report. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No? Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Oh. Councillor White is the mover, Councillor McCracken is the seconder. Is it to be opposed? Oh, Councillor White's the mover. You're the seconder? Yep. Okay. Councillor White is the mover.
Not a lot to say. I've been on the committee for a couple of meetings now, and again, a big learning curve, but impressed with the way it's conducted, and I think the report's pretty self-explanatory, and I'd like to support the report.
Councillor McCracken? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay. Now we move to item 10.7, the sale of 36 to 52 Bruce Street, Colac. The purpose of this report is to determine to release the confidential resolution made at the 4th of May 2022 unscheduled council meeting in relation to agenda item 4.1, sale of 36 to 52 Bruce Street, Colac, following the execution of the relevant contract documentation. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Costin.
Mayor, I'd just like to flag up an alternative recommendation. Thank you. Alternative motion.
You've got a motion. Does any other councillor have any questions? Councillor Costin, you have a motion that you wish to move, which is up on the screen.
Thank you, Mayor. It is up on the screen. It just extends the officer recommendation a little bit to broaden out what we will release to the community, to our public, from just the resolution, but to also include the officer recommendation, the motions and the voting on those motions.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hart. Is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken. Councillor Costin as the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, on the face of it, it might seem an odd request to release this information once it becomes non-confidential, but it's not really odd. Many councils have governance rules that require the release of confidential information once it's no longer confidential. The City of Port Phillip, for example, requires the CEO to maintain a register of confidential information and to recommend to council for the public release of that information once it's no longer confidential. And they do this in the interest of good governance and transparency. The only difference here is that the CEO's recommendation proposed to release the resolution only, whereas many other councillors released the full minutes, which includes the officer recommendation, any motions, including amendments and the results of any divisions called. This is so the public can clearly see how their councillors make decisions and to give them an insight into the reasons for those decisions. In our council plan on page 37, we commit to be leaders in good governance and transparency. So that's why I'm moving this alternate motion to release to reach the full minutes, which includes the motions and the voting on the motions. It's simply a matter of good governance and transparency that we say we're committed to. A full disclosure like this prevents council abuse of the closed sessions process. Many members of the public I talk to say how pleased they are that this council is working together much more than previous councils, and that's great. So by releasing the full minutes, we can demonstrate to our community how this collaboration is going. We can show there's been no abuse of the closed session by a councillor introducing or making decisions on other non-confidential matters not covered by the resolution to go into closed session. We can show that councillors afforded each other with the respect outlined in our Code of Conduct by giving adequate notice of any proposed amendments. We can also show that we undertook the appropriate level of consultation in line with our council plan to provide opportunities for the community to participate in decisions that may affect them. So in a nutshell, I'm proposing this alternate motion to release the full minutes to show our commitment to full transparency and our commitment to good governance by using the process of closed sessions as it's intended for confidential matters only, and that we don't use those sessions to decide on other non-confidential matters that may first require community consultation. Thank you.
Councillor Hart, you're a seconder.
Thanks, Mayor. My position on these sorts of things has been consistent over a number of years. Essentially, something might go into a confidential discussion, as this item did, to discuss, and I've got to be careful I don't breach that confidentiality, but obviously to discuss whether or not the property might be sold in this instance, or who it may or may not be sold for, and what those terms may or may not be. And that's the reason that this went into a confidential meeting. Having made that decision, there's really no reason to keep the resolution that was adopted and to keep that confidential. And in the past, when these sorts of resolutions have been released, that includes who moved, who seconded, what the resolution was, and the voting, which may be, at the minimum we know the minutes show how many voted in favour for a particular item and how many against, or if a division was called, that recording. That's been the practice in the past. I think it's open and transparent. And if you went through a lot of council minutes, I can't name a particular one today, but I have seen them in the past, where you often see where something is attached which says that this was a confidential resolution that was adopted and later released. So I think we just need to remember the reason that this went into a confidential meeting was so we could have free discussion on the various options. And once that's decided, there's really no need to keep it confidential, and it would be rather odd if, having disclosed the resolution, it didn't have the mechanics of that resolution, who moved, who seconded, and the voting. And if a division was called, that would also be part of that process. Certainly been the case in the past, and it's something I consistently support when we have these sorts of discussions.
Councillor McCracken, you oppose.
Thanks, Mayor. I guess I am a bit disappointed to see this, because I know, we had a few sort of discussions before. Sorry? Part of this is about transparency, but I think there is more to this as well. I think part of this motion is about exposing how councillors voted on a particular motion in a confidential situation, particularly with the inclusion of the disclosure of divisions, amendments and all those sort of things. Disclosing that, how it will be used, I don't know. I guess as a general, for me, once a vote's taken, you accept the outcome and you move on, and I guess we have to respect that, because it's a waste of time to rehash old arguments and to go over old ground when we should be trying to move positively forward. I think about the way that we work with each other, and we all have different perspectives, and we all have different views, different values, and this diversity comes together when we make a collective decision, and that's a good thing. But trying to expose fellow councillors when there might be a disagreement with the decision, I don't think is really in the spirit of the way we go about things. And that's really the main issue I have with this. We need to think about the relationships we have with each other and how we can think about that in the way that we work together. I'm concerned that this move might make it a bit more fractured and maybe even more toxic. I'm not sure. But I don't think it's a real healthy move, and it limits our ability to really collaborate and make quality decisions together. It's sort of going down a path that, you know, I think we can aspire to better things and make decisions in better ways. And let's try and show that to the community rather than trying to expose each other and perhaps even, you know, shame each other for what's happened. Let's try and be the better people here and really show the community leadership. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I can't support this alternative motion. I think when you read the officer's recommendation, it does allow for the CEO to release the determining motion, who moved it, and how the vote was. And I think if that's the intent of this, well, that would be achieved. And I just worry that there's another motive behind this motion. We should be transparent, but sometimes, and the community gets this, we have to have discussions behind closed doors for a variety of reasons. What's really disappointed me has been reference to council abuse of the process. That implies that conduct of councillors has been improper. It's provocative, and I haven't witnessed abuse of the process. Maybe I'm a bit naive, and I guess it could be subjective, but I wouldn't stand for abuse of the process. And for that term to be used in this discussion this evening, I'm a little bit disappointed. There's still some confidentiality around the matter that we discussed when we were in this unscheduled meeting, so I'm loath to release too much too early. Down the track, it might be appropriate to go that extra step, but right now I don't think it is.
Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mayor. I foreshadow a motion. If this is defeated, yeah.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart, did you reserve or you spoke? You spoke. Councillor Costin, you have a right of reply.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm a bit disappointed in the opposition to this alternate. I thought it was a fairly straightforward matter. So I'm a little alarmed for the future also to hear this opposition. We are all committed to work together, and we need to show our community that we work together. And to say it again, once the contract for the sale of Bruce Street is signed and exchanged, the 4 minutes will no longer prejudice any commercial negotiations. And that's the sole reason we went into closed session. So it logically follows for our community that we should release the 4 minutes, because that's the commitment we gave in our council plan, that we're committed to good governance and transparency. And I just caution councillors who might vote against this that I think you're only delaying the inevitable, because a simple freedom of information request will be all that's needed to release the 4 minutes once the contract is executed, because there's no valid reason to deny a freedom of information request. So do we really want to waste everyone's time by going through that process when we can put it to bed right now? So councillors, if you're fully committed to the statement in our council plan, that we will be leaders in good governance and transparency, then I urge you to vote for this alternate motion. Thank you.
Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The item's defeated 2-5. Councillor Bell, you flagged you had a motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, sorry for the confusion. I wasn't really sure what the Mayor was actually getting at there, but I was, in the event of that alternative motion failing, prepared to move the officer recommendation, which I now do.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Potter, is it to be opposed? Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm not sure still the intent that was previously spoken about before, but I think in the terms of this particular motion, it draws a completely fair conclusion, and I'll certainly be supporting the councillor recommendation.
Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Clearly there's still some work to do, and then once that's done, what will be released will be the council resolution and the details around that. So I'm happy to support this.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I think I hope I was clear with when I spoke before, and I say a similar thing here. My position on these sorts of things has been consistent when they've come before council, and doesn't carry with it any suggestion of anything inappropriate. It's been a consistent approach, and it'll be good to see that if this recommendation is passed, that the resolution is released. But I would have to say that in the 10 years plus I've been a councillor, this would be the first time ever, in my recollection, that a confidential resolution is released and it doesn't say who moved it, who seconded it, and the voting. If that's, unless that's going to be released, if it is, that's great. If that's great, then I'm not quite sure what we're having an argument about today. But if that is released, then I apologise, and that's great. But if it was released without that information, it would be rather odd.
Councillor Costin.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll support this motion, but I'll do it somewhat reluctantly, given the vote on my alternate motion. I think this provides context for officer reports in the future. It's good context. The community doesn't need an explanation of why they will prepare reports in a certain way, but it really doesn't go far enough for me. It doesn't provide context for future council discussions and may even constrain some of the discussions we can have. Thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.8, the revocation of authorised officers under the Planning and Environment Act. The purpose of this report is to revoke the instrument of appointment and authorisation for Mr Tony McGann, who is no longer employed by council. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No. Councillors, does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this? Councillor Hart, move the recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Costin, is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. In doing this, I just want to make the point that I thank Tony McGann for his service, but this is just a legal requirement, if you like, in terms of ensuring that delegations appropriately reflect whether someone's employed or not with council, and that's the context of this resolution.
Councillor Costin? No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 10.9, the report of informal meetings of councillors. Please note that the purpose of this item is to report the informal meetings of councillors and does not require a council decision. Thank you, councillors. That concludes this council meeting of the Colac Otway Shire. I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.